insights. Before we conclude this session, I would like to invite everyone to participate in one word in our one word cloud by sharing to share one takeaway word that you will best describe what you have gathered from this session. Also, at the end of this, we will get a group photo. I'll let our team also arrange that. But once again, thank you all. And I would like to again invite our IT moderator to share the link to the box and bring up the web cloud question on the screen.
So, Mr. Moderator, as you can see on the screen earlier, was all the inputs that we've received from our participants based on the discussion that's been taking place during the session. So, really, thank you to all participants. Mr. Moderator, perhaps we can move on to the group photo. Thank you.
Yes, yes. What should I? Yes.
Can you please open your camera so I can take a group photo?
There's one. To IT would shown this will be done by your.
Yes, Mr. Moderator. Ms. Nada will coordinate this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can everyone open their camera so I can take a photo, please? Okay, I will take the photo now. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you all. I would also like to thank the participants that have joined this session. I hope you are all able to benefit from this discussion and the insights shared by our distinguished panelists. Again, thank you for your participation. I would like to now hand the floor back to Mr. Amir to share more information on the meeting. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. And thank you very much. Thank you for your excellent moderation. And also thank you very much, Mrs. Bastian, Ms. Madiha, and Dr. Kamarat for joining us in the session. So I believe that we'll be moving on to our next session, which is on school connectivity for all, a special initiative in GIGA, which is going to be moderated by Mr. Frank van Kapel from UNICEF. On that note, I'll hand over the floor to the next session. Mr. Frank, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to the next session, to the 8th session of the Asia-Pacific Regional Dialogue on Digital Transformation. And this session focuses on school connectivity for all. My name is Frank van Kapelle. I'm the Digital Learning Lead for UNICEF South Asia. And I will be the moderator for this session. In the chat, if you like, if you can introduce yourself, that would be great. But to start with, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Atsuko Akuda for the opening remarks. She's the Regional Director for the International Telecommunications Union and has extensive experience working in digital technology and development across Asia and the Pacific, Africa, and the Middle East. Over to you, Atsuko.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. And it's a great pleasure to be with you today. And I believe that this session is an excellent segue from the discussion on affordable devices to school connectivity, because these are the two topics which touches upon the digital technology and connectivity parts. And before we move on to another topic, I just want to highlight the appreciation that we have to UNICEF. And Frank is a co-convener of one of the working groups under education and digitization, and we really cherish the partnership we have with UNICEF. So I hope that this definitely will continue. And I also want to invite the participants to the hour of code that we organize later during this regional event together with the UNICEF and other partners as an example of our collaboration and cooperation with UNICEF. Now, I would like to say a few words on the impact that COVID has had on school and children and teachers, as we all know that they were negatively impacted, especially among the developing countries, and how to make sure that the connectivity as well as devices are available for them to continue on the e-learning platforms. And I believe that we are very fortunate today to have distinguished speakers in this meeting to share with us what has worked and what more we can do together with our partners and government, industry, academia, and civil society. And moving forward, we will have additional challenges facing us in terms of the hybrid modes. What will be the post-COVID education landscape? And these are the questions that will come on our way sooner than later. So I look forward to our lively and engaging discussions ahead of us. And thank you again for your participation and looking forward to the session today. Back to you, Frank.
Thank you so much, Atsuko, and thank you for raising these very important questions. And as UNICEF, we are very much looking forward to continuing the very fruitful collaboration. I believe now we will have a quick group picture. If you could all just switch on your cameras. And then our expert photographer will take a photo.
Okay, I'll take the photo now.
I think I see a few screens still flashing on.
Yeah. So can everyone open the cameras, because some people still didn't open it, if it's possible. Okay, I'll take it now.
I didn't see a flash, but I assume it's done.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's done.
You don't have that functionality in Zoom yet.
No.
So yeah, you will see in the chat a Slido word cloud links also for this session. When you have a chance later, it'd be great if you can just type one word indicating a key takeaway that you got from this session. So now we're moving to our very distinguished speakers. And the first presentation topic is on transforming adversity into opportunity for school connectivity. And we have as our first speaker, Mr. Danny Ismawan, who is the Director of Information Technology Services for Public and Government Sector of the Agency of Telecommunications and Information Accessibility in the Ministry of ICT in Indonesia. So over to you, Mr. Ismawan.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to introduce you shortly about Bhakti organization, if you don't mind. Next slide, please. So Bhakti is the Universal Service Obligation Agency in the telecommunication sector under the MCI Republic of Indonesia. And as we know, Indonesia is the largest archipelagic countries in the world, has many challenges to provide equitable infrastructure development, especially in the rural areas. And we have our own terms. It's called 3T, terdepan, tertinggal, dan terluar. And it means the outermost island, borderland, and also the disadvantaged area. And through the affirmative policy the government of Indonesia is presented to develop telecommunication and information infrastructure to support the digital economy development. Next slide, please. And as we see today, the digital divide it's still become the biggest challenge for us. There are more than 12,000 villages in Indonesia not being covered by the 4G services, and also more than 150,000 public facility location, such as school, health center, government village office, still have no internet connection. Next slide, please. So the President Jokowi give the mandates on how to accelerate the digital transformation. And to achieve the vision, we intend to accelerate the development of the digital infrastructure through these programs. Let me explain each of the programs. The first program is called the Palaparing. It's the 12,000 kilometer backbone network project that connect more than 90 regencies or cities in remote areas using fiber optic and also the microwave radio connection. And the second is the BTS 4G. We deploy the 4G cellular telecommunication networks in remote areas. And we have mandates how to complete or to finish all these 7,090 villages will be operating in the end of the 2022. So it means that in the end of 2022, all the villages is already covered by the 4G network services. The next program is the internet access. We provide the free internet access for the public facilities using the fiber technology, radio link, satellite, and also the Wi-Fi. And until the second quarter 2020, we already serve more than 11,000 public facility location throughout Indonesia. And for your information, all of this program is using the more than 60% of our satellite resources. So it's why we continue to the other programs. Right now, we still in the staging of the manufacture to provide the multifunction satellite. It's called Satria, Satellite Republik Indonesia, with the latest technology, high throughput satellite. The capacity is 150 gigabit per second, and it will be launched at the end of 2023. And we also will cover more than 150,000 public location services. And the last is the digital ecosystem program, how to increasing community productivity through the empowerment and assistance in utilizing the telecommunication, especially in the rural area. Okay, now next slide, please. So this the more pictures about the latest program, Satria. Today is still manufactured in the Thales France for construction stage, and we hope the timeline is is still on the time in the end of the 2023, and in the early 2022 we will starting to install or the ground segment in the gradual numbers to prepare when the satellite is already operating and it will be fully operated maybe in the same time when the satellite are launching. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the key challenge at education in Indonesia, and maybe I will focusing in the internet infrastructure only. The total, the numbers of the school in Indonesia today is more than 300,000 school, and it divide the school is some school is authority by the Ministry of the Education and Culture, and the rest is managed by the Ministry of the Religious Affairs. And the condition is maybe quite same. Yeah? More than 24% of the school in Indonesia don't have internet access. And also the not only the internet, this is the primary condition. They also don't have the electricity for present, and that's why our policy is how to accelerate the completion 4G connectivity for all the villages in Indonesia. We hope that it will solve about the internet access connection with the mobile broadband. So this is not the ideal condition, but we hope maybe with the next Satria satellite already operating, it will be improved the quality of the connectivity in the all aspect of the digital infrastructure needs. Okay, based on the data written in the slide, beside this, about the next infrastructure, the areas outside the Java and Sumatra only contribute to 22% of the total internet user. So the lack of internet infrastructure leads the quality of the education as well as the inclusivity of education itself. And maybe I would like to explain about the last one, the low digital literacy index. That also has been the MCI concern. As I mentioned about the digital transformation ahead, the literacy level is very important to accelerate the technology adoption. The growth of the digital economy will not be big enough if the fundamentals problem, like how people receive, understand, and also give feedbacks about the technology is very low rate. Okay, next slide. Okay, maybe I just want to explain just a quick. The pandemic creates the disruption and at the same time the momentum for transformation. We see that this pandemic also we see as what is called blessing in disguise. Yeah, because before the biggest challenge is the technology adoption, but with this pandemics, people forced to be transformed. And I think the Ministry of the Education and Cultures using this momentum very good. So they push the digital transformation with the distant learning, at-home learning, and also the TV-based teaching. So this all will accelerate provisions of electricity and connectivity also. Next slide, please. So maybe this is the several programs that we also contribute for in the education sectors. It is in the general we get this momentum how to increasing the teaching output from day-to-day education activities will have a positive impact to the students in order to answer the demographic bonus that Indonesia will have in the next few years. And we believe by providing innovation, training, and platform for teachers through online education, it will spark more conversation, discussion, or maybe innovation within the school environment. And so we provide the learning platform that serves various needs from formal education to non-formal education, such as coding and also the creative economy activities. So we have the teachers in Indonesia will not only have basic competencies, but also future competencies for the digital challenge forward. Okay, maybe that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm glad for the further discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ismawan, and thank you very much for this great presentation of the great challenges that you are facing in connecting all schools in Indonesia, but also how you're tackling those challenges, and also the enormous opportunity, as you say, over the coming years to greatly expand learning and training opportunities and also innovation. Just a quick reminder for any participants, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. And we're now moving to our next distinguished speaker, Mr. Wasim Ajmal, who is the Joint Secretary for International Coordination in the Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training in Pakistan. So over to you, please, Mr. Ajmal.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. And it's a great pleasure and privilege for me to participate in this conference sponsored by ITU. ITU is a great partner with the ministry, and we are working with them and the UNICEF through this GIGA initiative to plan better, to map the schools, and then to plan effectively for the connectivity issues for the schools in Pakistan. Coming to the topic, the issue of school connectivity in Pakistan, the challenges and solutions, as the first speaker has also highlighted that it was the pandemic, although the importance of technology and the use of internet was already being discussed as part of an enabler, as a tool for enhancing the quality education. But it was the pandemic who really, accelerated these efforts, and the governments were, had no other, and made it almost inevitable for the governments to come up with such measures through which we can, cover some of the learning losses due to the forced closures of schools because of the pandemic. Although Pakistan did perform and manage the pandemic situation much better than some other countries, but in terms of overcoming the learning losses, or in terms of meeting the educational challenges, we still need to do much better. And I think the connectivity issues, if properly addressed, that can perhaps lead better to overcoming some of the education challenges. Next slide, please. Next, please. So coming to the areas where, we feel major challenges and how they are linked with the connectivity issues. I think in an earlier session, one of Pakistani colleague from the private sector also highlighted that the access to internet in Pakistan is very low. If you see out of the total population, we have about 63% living in rural areas, and the overall access to internet is 34%, and in the rural areas, it's further, about 24% only. And it's not only the broad division of rural or urban. There are certain districts within the provinces who have further low connectivity issues, and we have identified them what we call the lagging districts. And the government has special plans to come up with the connecting those schools somehow with the internet. And even within the cities, within the urban areas like Karachi or Lahore, even there are still pockets where there are issues of having access to the internet. Uh, so it's not only the issue of having connectivity, as my earlier colleague has pointed out, that there are issues of affordability around having devices, and there are cultural barriers having devices as well. And keeping in view an overall economy crisis, we do face how to access to the financial resources for this kind of activity, which really requires a lot of money for the infrastructure. Next, please. If we come towards the area of real educational challenges, or what we call the learning challenges in Pakistan, the biggest amongst them is that the 22.4 million children who are out of school. So, and these are the children, who, because of multiple reasons, maybe it's poverty, maybe it's access is far from the houses, or there are certain dropouts from the schools, and a big number of them is also girls. So, in order to bring them back to school or to provide them alternate pathways, what the ministry has found out that the best way to deal with the situation is through distance learning, through education at home, and that can only be best provided through the use of technology, which obviously requires some kind of online or offline solutions for that. The other area which we are really struggling in the context of education crisis in Pakistan is even those children who are, going to schools and actually undertaking education even as a formal mode. There is a crisis of what we call, or the World Bank calls, the learning poverty, that because of lack of quality education, or perhaps lack of proper training on part of the teachers, the children are not really the learning outcomes which the children are supposed to have in a particular grade. When they are, assessed, or, some kind of diagnostics are being made, it's found out that all children in the class are not at the same level, and they are, many of them maybe even do not qualify to be in those grades. So that has led to another challenge of that, how we provide a kind of remedial learning and provide them, support so that they all come at the same level. And also there is an issue of, having a uniform and equitable education system towards all children in Pakistan, because we have different streams for the elite schools, different streams for the religious schools, and a different stream for the public sector schools. So the private sector schools in the urban areas, or even in some rural areas, are better equipped in terms of resources, in terms of devices, and in terms of connectivity. And then there are, real challenges in terms of access to the higher education, where there is even lesser students who have access to higher education, although the higher education is being subsidized heavily by the government. But still, there are very few, or not more than 15% students who have access to that. And during COVID, again, there was a challenge: how can the universities quickly, adopt the remote learning modes and use these technology platforms and the apps to how to continue the learning for the students. So overall, we have found out that both at university level and at the school level, these learning losses have really compounded. And that led us to a crisis because of these frequent closures and because of these frequently interrupted learning process. It was already there, but the COVID crisis actually accentuated that. And that is why this technology adoption, which can be one of the way to address these challenges, has become really very important for the government. So that is why, in fact, the Education Ministry has now started taking lead to, provide some technology solutions, because within the federal government, there is another ministry which is called the Information Technology Ministry, and they are dealing with the issues of providing access to the districts, and they are mapping where maybe the broadband is maybe the solution, and where the telecos can go, or these kinds of issues are being handled by the Ministry of IT, and a universal service fund, like the earlier mentioned by another speaker, that is managed by them, where telecos contribute towards the government fund and then jointly plan for the connectivity to various districts. And schools are also a part of that. And we have now started collaborating with them very closely. And we have started mapping out, the school coordinates with the overall, kind of connectivity facility available to them, where so we are now trying to find out that where could be the broadband, where could be the optic fiber, or where could be maybe the satellite solution or the tower solution. So all these kinds of things are being explored through a well-defined project intervention, and which would probably lead us towards some better connectivity in the school. So in that context of the learning challenges, the Pakistan really needs to, develop system for distance learning, which could help these address these challenges. So the teachers could be better trained on that, and the distance learning content, which we are developing with the help of some edtech partners. And we are also partnering with Google to provide some kind of end user devices, and because of cultural barriers, we may use, thinking of using the Chromebooks, where the content may be controlled, or similarly using some laptops. The parental support and the supportive infrastructure, and including connectivity. These are the various kinds of challenges and ecosystem which we are trying to build to provide connectivity solution to the schools in Pakistan. Next slide, please. Next, please. So when we discuss the areas where how we can move forward on that, enhancing connectivity and digital learning plans to provide, some kind of solution to this digital divide, which has not only during the COVID has been highlighted in terms of geographical areas, but also in terms of the rich and poor divide, or the public sector schools versus the elite schools, where it has become very, obvious and a very, notable and significant divide in that case. So first of all, we are trying. There's a dedicated project which we have recently developed with the help of Asian Development Bank, and also the Universal Service Fund, which is managed under the Ministry of IT. As I've already discussed, they have now started mapping the schools, and they will try to link those schools with various kinds of option, whether it's fiber or whether it's tower. I'll come to that to the beginning. So it's not only we are exploring, the real connectivity to the schools, but where, the areas are underserved or less served, but also, coming up with some offline solutions and using the spot solutions for a local area wireless network, and then providing schools with a kind of offline learning management systems, which could even also be, used for some kind of community communication mechanisms, and maybe the community can also use those wireless networks for their other activities as well. But this requires us to strengthen the teacher capacity, and we have started a program in the lagging districts with huge funding for for the teachers trainings, particularly in the context of using distance learning and edtech platforms. So this is a World Bank funded project which we have started across Pakistan. It's more than $200 million. It's supporting lagging districts in Pakistan. So that would also contribute some kind of infrastructure in terms of devices, which we intend to provide to the schools, and the connectivity solution will be mostly funded by the IT ministry. Next slide, please. The kind of solutions which we so far, I'm not an IT expert, but the kind of discussions we were having, that so far what we have found to be more economical and more suitable to us. And in fact, one of the reasons we are collaborating with ITU and UNICEF in terms of GIGA project initiative, that because unless the school mapping is done, we are really not in a position to find out the most economical solution, and which may become very sustainable. But because that may take some time, so and the urgency is um, is a kind of thing which actually should have been done yesterday. So coming to the solution, which at the moment we are looking for, is what is called point-to-point telecommunication, or the tech experts call it P2P, whereby from a tower we can connect it to the school with the help of a device, and then create a local area network with the help of that. So this would be where the broadband is poor or unavailable. Next slide, please. And then, the other is this offline e-learning environment, where we work with the help of a wireless local area network, and we provide them a specialized kind of digital content, which can be used with the help of learning management system, and which can be hosted from an on-site dedicated server. And also this would be strengthened with the help of certain devices within the classrooms to the children. And, this can be made more user-friendly for the students. This is the kind of overall planning at the moment for the school connectivity in Pakistan. This is a big challenge for us, and this requires huge financing. We are exploring partnerships with the private sector as well as with the donors to come up with the required financing. And also there is a fund, as I said, to tap on that to provide the digital connectivity to the schools. That's here I would like to stop, and in fact, we can discuss it further during the question answer sessions. Thank you very much for ITU for providing this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ajmal, for this very comprehensive overview of all the efforts in Pakistan, not just to connect schools, but as you indicate, there are also many other factors that are important to complement school connectivity, like the teacher training, the learning management systems. And as you indicate, there is a huge learning crisis even before COVID, and the evidence is coming in that it has significantly worsened. So just putting some urgency also behind what you indicate of connecting schools for digital and blended learning, but also remedial education and distance learning for future school closures. So thank you very much for that. And also the detailed mapping that you're now doing in Pakistan to map exactly where those unconnected schools and areas are, and the urgency behind that. So thank you so much for that, Mr. Ajmal. Our next presentation topic is on enabling policy and regulatory environment for digital transformation. And our next distinguished speaker is Mr. Toan Sondang from UNESCO Asia Pacific, where he is an ICT and education specialist. and he focuses on education policy, ICT and education policy development, as well as digital skills development for teachers and students, which we've just learned as well is a critical area as well. His focus is on supporting governments to systematically strengthen education policies for digital transformation. So over to you, Mr. Tuanda.
Thanks, Frank. Just 1 second. Okay, good day, good evening from UNESCO Bangkok. I'd first like to thank ITU and the organizers for inviting us, and also to all the participants for joining this session. I am looking forward to sharing and connecting and learning from you as well on how we can work together to support digital transformation education. Today, I'll be presenting some examples of policies and interventions that UNESCO has been implementing to support digital transformation in the region. And so it'll be a bit different from the first two that you've heard, focusing on school connectivity. Next slide, please. So I first want to highlight a juxtaposition, one of opportunities and challenges that we've heard many times today. On one hand, the increased recognition and pace of digital transformation, where society, governments, and private sector alike are now putting heightened attention towards digital transformation. A report from OECD in 2020 highlighted that 34 countries have now put digital transformation at the front and center of their policy agendas. Yet, on the other hand, the digital transformation journey is fraught with many challenges, one of which is the unequal access to digital technologies and digital divide, which during the pandemic resulted in millions of children being unable to access education opportunities, learning losses, and potentially changing the trajectories of their entire lives. COVID was the reality check, and what I would also add as the stress test to these challenges. Next slide, please. So a dimension of the digital divide, and a very important one, is the digital skills divide. It has been found that the inadequate digital skills and competencies among teachers and students is the single greatest barrier to technology use in education. And this is regardless of the country's development status. We saw evidence of this during COVID, where teachers did not have the skills or readiness nor proper connectivity to effectively deploy distance learning. For example, only 1 of 3 countries reported having access to sufficient internet connectivity and ICT school tools for teachers to work during school closures. And UNICEF alerts us that still 3.5 billion children still need to be connected by 2030 if we were to ensure inclusive digital learning for all children. Next slide, please. So what are some of the ways to ensure that policies can drive equitable connectivity while ensuring that digital skills divide can and also be narrowed? I'd like to share 3 areas that UNESCO has been working on to provide systematic strengthening of education systems to ensure inclusive and quality digital learning. This is at the policy, teacher, and learner levels. Next slide, please. So over the past decade, UNESCO has continuously supported countries in the development of ICT in education policies and strategies. An ICT in Education Master Plan provides a comprehensive roadmap of the vision, goals, thematic areas, activities, and mechanisms for how ICT can effectively integrate into education systems. To the right, you'll see 4 such policies from Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, and Nepal that we have helped to support in the last few years. In the development of these policies, it is critical to focus on equity, inclusion, and quality in the initial planning process. This is so that ICT can adequately address the digital divides rather than exacerbating them. And here, we make sure that the proper stakeholders are included as part of the drafting committees for such policies and are engaged in the implementation and consultations. Master plans act as the bridge between policies from the education and ICT sectors. They seek to be coherent and aligned with the objectives from both sectors, and they try to translate them into meaningful education outcomes, which is what we're trying to achieve. And this is essential because master plans also contain financial costing and planning to ensure that these policies are able to mobilize the required resources from governments and partners. And lastly, these policies prioritize strategic activities such as ICT infrastructure and teacher development, which are key components of the master plan. Next slide, please. So here I'd like to highlight a case from Bhutan and how the master plan helped to enable ICT in education in the country. Firstly, the policy development process engaged multiple stakeholders from various ministries and down to the local and school levels. These members played key roles as part of the joint task force, governance committees, were responsible for implementation of the projects, And this enabled efficient planning when it came to implementing projects such as ICT infrastructure and connectivity. In Bhutan, a decentralized approach was taken where they developed ICT standards and then decentralized the funds down to local governments to customize how they would implement within those guidelines. And this involved partnerships with internet service providers to ensure that high-speed connectivity would be provided to the schools at the same time. And furthermore, support to the teachers would ensure that they could make meaningful use of the connectivity. The close alignment of the master plan with the government's overarching development plan ensured that over 96% of its activities had already been accounted through the regular government budget. Next slide, please. And at the teacher level, our work with member states has been to strengthen teacher policies for supporting and promoting large-scale competency-based teacher training. ICT competency standards for teachers outline the expected competencies for teachers within the different proficiency levels, which are then integrated into teacher training curricula and professional development. They also serve as the basis for teacher assessment, recognition, monitoring, and evaluation. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned before, teachers' ICT competencies are critical to facilitating the digital transformation and digital teaching and learning. Yet the lack of connectivity has been one major barrier. Here, I'd like to share some reflections of the realities that we have seen at the teacher level during the implementation of ICT CST. We conducted a study on teachers' readiness for conducting learning through ICT and found that still 45% of teachers in Lao PDR had reported that they had rarely or never used desktop computers, laptops, or mobile phones for teaching in the classroom. And in terms of professional development opportunities, 78% of teachers reported that they had not received any training at their schools. The various challenges highlighted on the right are from the teachers in Mongolia, which pointed to several systemic challenges for implementing ICT skills development for teachers. And this includes a low foundation of previous experience and skills in ICT, lack of the proper infrastructure and connectivity, and the necessary curriculum to support their teaching. Now, these data points add nuanced understanding to the reports on lack of support and preparation for teachers, which we've already seen emerge over the last 2 years. Next slide, please. The last initiative that I want to share is Digital Kids Asia Pacific, which is focused on the learner level and ensuring equitable digital citizenship skills for all students. 4 years ago, we launched this initiative to find out what are the digital skills needed for children to flourish in the digital era, and also what are the enabling factors that support that development. The end result was a holistic framework with 5 key domains, and this was translated into validated research toolkit to allow governments and stakeholders to quickly gather evidence to inform digital education policies and interventions. To date, 9 countries in the region have taken part in this early initiative. Next slide, please. And here I'd just like to share some key findings from the research. First, unsurprisingly, we found that there's a positive relationship between access to devices and the internet and the level of self-reported skills by students. And the data also showed that a lower proportion of students reported having access to internet connectivity in schools compared to at homes in all of the participating countries, which shows that there's still more work to do to ensure connectivity to students in schools. Next slide, please. And connected to the previous slide, we also found that students who indicated that they learned the most of using computers and internet through self-learning and who had access to ICT outside of schools scored highest in digital citizenship competencies. Now, this indicates that digital skills development are happening more, or may be happening more outside of school context, and that strategic connectivity could be added at the community levels. We also looked at the linkages between teachers' ICT skills and students' digital citizenship and how policies could support this development. Here, the largest differences in digital skills are seen within schools rather than differences when comparing across schools. This means that once there's connectivities, policies should be looking at targeted approaches to lower the divide within the schools. Policies should be looking at modalities such as enabling peer learning. And lastly, regarding gender, we observe differences in how boys and girls are learning about using computers and the internet. Particularly, girls show to slightly benefit more when they receive more guidance from teachers in areas such as digital safety and resilience and creativity. Therefore, policies need to reflect and encourage diverse learning opportunities for students based on their styles, propensities, and gender. Now I have a last slide on key takeaways, but I believe we'll cover that in the next session. So I'll now pass it back to Frank. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toon. And you've raised the importance of the ICT in Education Master Plan um, to ensure an equitable and inclusive and properly budgeted and also very importantly, a holistic approach to ensure that all the different elements of ICT in education are working in tandem, including also aspects like teacher training and curriculum and around integrating ICT in schools. But I thought it was also a really interesting point just now that you mentioned the variation within schools, not just between schools, in terms of learners and teachers' capability to use ICT. And I think that's a really important one to consider as well, and one we don't often hear, I think. Just a reminder about the Slido in the chat for your key takeaway from the session, if you have a chance to do so. And then we'll move now to the next presentation topic, which is ITU and FCDO and the GIGA initiative in Asia and the Pacific. And we have two speakers. This will be the final presentation topic. The first speaker, hello, Ms. Shaina Hassan. She's a GIGA project officer in the Asia Pacific region and manages and coordinates the FCDO project in Indonesia. And we also have Mr. Pujiono, who is the senior advisor for coordination at ITU Asia Pacific, responsible for supporting Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and also for engagement with the Asian region. So over to you, Shaina.
Thank you, Frank, and hello, good morning, good afternoon, distinguished guests and my esteemed speakers. I'm very cognizant of the time, so I'm going to make my presentation really quick. But before I start, may I please request the IT team to play a GIGA video. This is a quick 2 minutes video which we just released. So over to the IT team, please.
How many schools are there in the world? Where are they located? And how many are connected to the internet? Well, the truth is, we don't know it. Yet. GIGA, the innovative partnership between ITU and UNICEF, is set to answer these questions. Launched in 2019, GIGA has so far mapped close to 1 million schools in 40 countries, and is actively working to ensure that every child is equipped with the connectivity they need and empowered to shape the future they want. GIGA helps countries map schools and their connectivity, create investment opportunities, identify the most appropriate technologies, and high-quality, vetted and safe content. GIGA is bringing innovation to education and has been highlighted in the UN Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation and Our Common Agenda. Connecting all schools of the world to the internet is an ambitious but necessary undertaking. The time to act is now. Partner with GIGA and help us provide every young person with access to information, opportunity, and choice.
Thank you. Can we have the slides? So let me just start by reiterating what our distinguished speakers have already said. So GIGA is a very ambitious project started by ITU and UNICEF in partnership in 2019. And the pandemic has indeed put it into the limelight and created a momentum. And we are working very closely with 19 countries already. And there's a great demand for GIGA in the Asia and the Pacific region. So next slide, please. So as we heard, it's highlighted in the Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation and is noted as a key way forward to achieve universal connectivity. Next slide, please. So for Giga, we have three main pillars. It's Map, Finance, and Connect. We are currently undertaking the mapping pillar. We are doing excellent work. More than 1 million schools have already been mapped, and we are making very good progress under the Finance and the Connect pillar. And then we have the Empower pillar, which is sort of all-encompassing. Because of course, just mapping the school locations is not going to suffice. So we need to give the students and the teachers also the tools and the digital skills. And for this particular pillar, we sort of leverage the work that is being done. For example, Frank is working very closely on Reimagine Education. There's Gen U project. So there are many other projects that we leverage for the Empower pillar. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me just give you an evidence of why map. What are the advantages of mapping? So not only does it create a demand in many countries, but also in Botswana, we saw that mapping the data of the schools along with infrastructure data, which ITU collects regularly, it allowed Giga and the government to identify which are the schools which are in the remote areas, what are the CapEx, what are the OpEx requirements, and also accordingly come up with a best fit technology solution. Next slide, please. So this is showing the maps of the school location. As you can see, most of the countries are in Africa and Latin America. Purple shows the data that has been processed, and blue shows data for which we also have school connectivity data available. And really like going forward to Asia and the Pacific, now we great demand and spearhead going forward. Slide.
Sorry, you seem to be breaking up a bit, or is it just my end? Ironically, talking to the internet.
Yeah, this is to confirm that Sina is breaking.
Yeah. Shiny, you're breaking up a little bit.
Next slide, please.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems I'm not connected. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So what you see now that these are some key facts and figures for Giga, and $22 million has already been raised, and we are now going to raise Gigabonds, which I will talk about soon. More than 1 million schools have been mapped across 41 countries, and 7 partners have joined already. We are working very closely with other partners as well. On the left, what you see is, of course, a map of Indonesia. We used open source data to show schools which are under 4G coverage area. So orange denotes that. And I'm very pleased to have Pardani with us here from MCI Indonesia. And we hope that going forward, we will be able to validate some of the data and also update them for Indonesia. Next slide, please. So these are the 11 steps of Giga. I'm not going to go into the details, and they don't necessarily have to be sequential depending on the country context, but we do need a high-level government buy-in, and we start with a multi-stakeholder forum and come up with a work plan for the country. And then ultimately, the goal is to come up with sustainable models and constant monitoring to show that the school connectivity is sustainable. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we also leverage from some of the work that ITU has been doing. So for example, the last mile connectivity solution guide, and we identify communities which are not connected, and then accordingly we come up with optimal solution in terms of technology, in terms of funding mechanisms, so on and so forth. Next slide, please. And finally, I would like to talk about Gigabond very quickly. Sorry, before that, these are just some of the pictures that you can see from a school in Kenya. You can see there's a teacher using laptop. There are teachers helping students use tablets. So this is just to give you an evidence. Kenya is a very important Giga country, and we are working very closely in many countries in Africa region. Next slide, please. So finally, I would just like to talk very quickly about the Gigabond. So ITU and UNICEF are working closely. We've got Citibank on board as an advisor, and we're going to the capital market to raise $5 billion worth of money. We are in talks with donors. We are in talks with many countries, and this is something on the line of what Gavi has done with vaccine bond. So it is going to be a social bond, and the money thus raised is going to be used for last mile connectivity. With that, I hand over the floor to my colleague, Mr. Puji Ono, and he's going to talk about a partner project of Giga, which is funded by FCDO, used to be known as DFID. So Puji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zaina. In that spirit of fast-track presentation, and Frank, thank you. There are several countries in which FCDO chipped in to be part of this and in alignment with the Giga initiative. And one of that is in Indonesia. This is a 12-month project that has 4 focused technical areas. Next. As you see from China, there are 11 steps. This FCDO-supported project is providing the initial, the foundational part of the larger undertaking. First is to look at the regulatory policy landscape, as well as the business process, and then exploring the models to expand school connectivity in a sustainable fashion, and then promoting a more viable business process. Now, the 4th technical area is leveraging ITU's accumulated knowledge, in this case, child online protection. Next. The progress so far, we have been presenting this project to the MCI and have the principal endorsement from the ministry, also meeting Pak Dani himself, as well as colleagues at the Ministry of Education. The assessment is ongoing now, both on policy and business process. And we also shared this project in different occasions, including this particular one, and with ISODEL, the International Symposium of Ministry of Education, just, I believe it was only last week. Next. As illustrated by China earlier, in the case of Indonesia, we map out the overall Indonesian territory. And then we also zoom into one of the provinces, in this case in the West Kalimantan, to look into the details of the situations there, that is able to even zooming into the cost of connecting internet to every single pupil at about $100 price, right? And we believe this is a really good conversation starter with government and other stakeholders. At the same time, a study conducted in collaboration with BCG has come out with a different sustainable financing, including the use of the village fund, community fund, government subsidy, and from the industry. Next. The possible way forward to the remaining of the months is several public events that we would like to explore with MCI and Ministry of Education to bring this finding to the public as part of the conversation. Some training workshop with practitioners, both regulators and industry, and then to have a roundtable with all stakeholders if possible. And next to that, there's the exploration if there is interest to join Giga for Indonesia. And also, I was having conversation with a colleague from Siameo if there is interest to bring it to the Southeast Asian level. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Shaina and Mr. Puji, and giving this great overview of Giga, such an important global initiative to connect all schools. And having that mapping and identifying the gaps, that's really a first step also for costing the scale up. I think we're running a little bit behind of time, so I'll move now quickly to the Q&A session. And we have 2 questions. The first question is for Mr. Ismawan. What will be your policy recommendations to connect all schools to the internet? What would be some of the key priority actions that you think can be taken in your country or more broadly in the region. So over to you, Mr. Ismawan, if you would like to answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Frank. So for the school connectivity problem, we are already coordinating with the Ministry of Education the fastest way how to serve the school that not yet covered by the internet is with the joint planning session, yeah, especially to to mapping the demand and the supply. So we already identify all of the school location, and we'll share this data to the telecommunication operators. So maybe they only have to optimizing the existing infrastructure to cover the school connectivity in the fastest way. I thought because in our roadmap, it still have to wait 2 more years to cover all the school. Thank you, Fred.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's, yeah, as you say, it's really building on what is in place already and finding effective and efficient ways to scale up. I have one question for Mr. Toan. So the question is, UNESCO, ITU, and other organizations are developing excellent plans and strategies and recommendations for governments. How could we accelerate the implementation of those plans and those recommendations that you've outlined? Over to you, Toan.
Thanks, Frank, and thank you for the person with the question. I think the implementation, we've actually seen already during COVID that the acceleration has already happened. Governments are very focused on implementing digital learning connectivity to respond to COVID, and then moving into the new normal, where this will be a more critical component of education systems. Particularly for the implementation, I think perhaps the policy that was presented from Pakistan is a really great example of a policy that provides very specific, concrete challenges that they're trying to address, and then specific outcomes that they might want to achieve within a given time period. And here, when I think when a government, when a system has such a policy, governments are actively looking for donors, for partners to implement such programs, and it's just a matter of either connecting with that focal point within the country, or with development agencies such as ITU, UNICEF, or UNESCO, so that we can make that connection. So that's one part. The second is, I think, for countries that do not have these plans yet, there's a strong component for advocacy that's still needed. There's a lot of countries that do not know what options are out there, and solutions from such partners can be presented at various events such as this one, so that there's more awareness and exposure of what they can do. So I think just 2 quick responses to that question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tuan, for that great response. We have a question for, but I think, I'm not sure if he's still with us, Mr. Ajmal, on digital platforms for teaching and learning in Pakistan. Is Mr. Ajmal still with us? Otherwise, I can move to the next and final question. I think he's no longer with us. So just one final question, which is just an open question to any of the speakers, any of the panelists, which is, what do you think of the idea of a Giga community? Because there's a lot of countries, including in Asia Pacific, working on the Giga initiatives, and how could we best support each other? Do you see an opportunity for coming together, sharing lessons learned, challenges, our work on collecting the right data, costing exercises, and so forth? So all the different elements around Giga, and if there's value in just exchanging around that within Asia Pacific. So just an open question for any of the speakers, if you would like to come in on that. or if there's no particular speaker, if I don't want to put you on the spot, Toan, but since you cover the region, what would you think of that approach?
For yourself, Frank.
Yeah, I could also try to answer, yes. But Toan, would you like to? Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of requests from member states, from members of ministries of education, and even actually from our own internal offices that people really do want to learn more about ICT in education, connectivity, and what are the best practices. So I think an idea of a community to share best practices is a great one and much needed. But at the same time, I want to note that there are a lot of different networks out there, and it takes a lot of resources to keep them going. So I think we need to explore if a community is to be developed and how it can be kept more participative and inclusive and organic in that, it doesn't become a burden on any other organization, because digital transformation, I think transformation in general requires massive amounts of resources. And we need to acknowledge that and not spread ourselves too thin in all these different networks and groups.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great response, Tawan. And yeah, since it was bounced back to me as well, so I'm based in the UNICEF South Asia office, and we actually do have a kind of community, but just within UNICEF internally of all the different colleagues working around Giga in some of the countries, and just working together on specific areas such as better understanding what kind of data is required, sharing experiences around that. We have a costing tool that we're currently developing for Scale Up, and I know ITU also has a very detailed costing tool as well. So that's another area to exchange best practices on, and also actually around fundraising. How do we get the funds to scale up? Just looking at different and innovative fundraising options as well beyond traditional ones. So yeah, I think it would be a great idea if we can identify and bring together the key focal persons, not just internally, but also within government, and see how we can work together on that. I think that concludes our session. I think we're running a little bit over time, so I won't continue too much longer, but I think school connectivity is a really pertinent issue, especially now with COVID. It's also a great equalizer in a way, because as we've seen in COVID, there are huge inequalities in households when it comes to connectivity, when it comes to access to devices, and it's really at the school level that we can, aim and seek to achieve, equal opportunities for digital and blended learning and opportunities that many learners do not have at home. So with that, I'll just conclude, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's session, and thank you to all the distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frank van Kappel, for your excellent moderation, and also to all speakers for your sharing your insights, and those who have asked questions and comments. Just before closing the whole thing, I would like to thank all the participants as well for engaging us through the Slido and the exchange of messages through the chats. Thanks for this contribution. But listen, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, the fun doesn't stop here. It will continue. As we are speaking, there is an ongoing parallel session right now. It's with a very important topic, digital financial services security. This is going on until 12:45. The direct Zoom link is in the chat. This will feature the ongoing conversation between telco and payments regulators about security weaknesses and also opportunity from digital financial inclusion standpoint. Please join in if your heart leads to that financial security transaction through the internet. On that note, participants, we will take a break, but at 1 o'clock Bangkok time, there's going to be session on digital accessible Asia Pacific, and then also a parallel session on unicefcode.org, that is introduction to the regional